Hi, welcome back. It's Wednesday and let's just jump straight into the news, shall we? Today's headliner, and you're not gonna believe, after 9 months, drumroll, there has been resistance found in Russia. And here's what else we're gonna discuss today. Ukraine is finding some very clever solutions to fight against the problems that arose with the full-scale invasion. Russians are planning another special military operation and might be making enemies in Belarus. And the New York Times got called out really hard for manipulating information. With that, hi, my name is Yulia and you're watching the brief midweek edition where we discuss everything that happened in and pertaining to Ukraine in the week so far in under 20 minutes. Let's go. I know this one is going to be hard to believe, but Ukraine recorded intensification of Russian resistance. So what exactly does this resistance entail? Well, on the night of January 4th, unknown guerrillas stopped the movement of trains and military echelons, and it happened in the section of a Trans-Siberian railway near Krasnoyarsk. So do you remember how in the beginning of the full-scale invasion there were Belarusian guerrillas who were blowing up railroads in Belarus in order to prevent weapon deliveries from Russia to Belarus and then them being launched to Ukraine? So something like that. In only 4 days this year, this is the 6th time of blockage of railways, which really messes up the military schedule. The Ukrainian Intelligence Directorate also noticed that a significant intensification of the railway guerrilla actions started happening when the rumors about the new mobilization began. Russians really don't want to die in the front lines, do they, for the cause they so believe in and support in 80% of the population. And then, interestingly, another case of what looks like resistance happened in the Russian city of Tomsk.
Пиздец. Охуеть. Ебанешься.
What you just saw is a fire at the camp of mobilized people. There is not much information on what started the fire, who started the fire, or what happened there to begin with, but what it looks like preliminarily is that the newly mobilized soldiers set the fire themselves. Why? Well, to avoid being sent to the front, and their tents and personal belongings burned down. And it looks like the Russian population overall is getting incredibly tired of this special military operation, as noted by the Polish intelligence. They stated that Russia is plunging into chaos, mass detentions in Moscow, panic actions of the internal service, raids in the streets, fires destroying Russian cities, explosions at military bases. The economic crisis is growing rapidly, and the state is unable to provide its citizens with even basic necessities. The war waged against Ukraine is weakening Russia. This is good news, the Polish officials added. And while it is good news indeed, do you think this is going to be enough to push the Russian masses to revolt? Let me know in the comments. And in the last update on the topic, albeit unknowingly, Lukashenko himself is resisting the Russian aggression as well. As it turns out, he has become the largest threat to Putin's health. How? Hackers from the United Resistance headquarters hacked into the medical center's website and published data on the coronavirus test that Lukashenko and his son took since 2020. So it looks like a lot of the times the test was taken at the same time as the result was published, which is impossible because a PCR normally takes a couple of days. Now, Yulia, how is this resistance, you will ask me? Well, when Lukashenko meets with Putin, he's required to take coronavirus tests because the latter is incredibly paranoid about the state of his health, and it looks like he hasn't been very sincere. So hypothetically, if the Belarusian dictator contracts COVID, he won't know, then he might go and meet with Putin, who also won't know, who might contract COVID, and you get my drift, right? So thank you, Lukashenko, for supporting Ukraine's effort in eliminating Vladimir Putin. And this is a perfect moment to take some time to remind you that if you've enjoyed this video so far, please don't forget to give it a like, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel, and turn on all of your notifications. Thank you! Speaking of Russia and Belarus, It might not be long until Lukashenko actually tries to eliminate Putin. There is a growing anti-Belarusian sentiment arising in Europe because of their actions in supporting Russia in the war with Ukraine. One example of this is Lithuanian MEP Austravicius, who said that we must clearly show Belarusians that they're not welcome here, just like Russians aren't. I'm convinced that the difference between the citizens of Belarus and Russia is decreasing. If the two regimes are more and more similar, why is our attitude towards their residents still different? This statement particularly concerns only the citizens of Belarus, not the government. But there have been calls for a while now to sanction Belarus the same way as we sanction Russia, because they are de facto participating in the war. And while Russia could survive all this time while being sanctioned and the cracks are only now rapidly showing due to their accumulation of wealth, Belarus could not survive that. And that would directly threaten Lukashenko's throne as a dictator, which he cannot afford to do. Coincidentally, right after that, the news came out that Russia has presently removed all stocks of the artillery ammunition and MLRS from the territory of Belarus that were created in the interest of the armed forces of the Russian Federation on the eve of the initial attack on Ukraine. Now, this could indicate two things. One, obviously, Russia is running out of ammo and needs backup. Two, Belarus is transferring the ammo to Russia because they don't want to participate in shelling the territory of Ukraine from their territory anymore. Could be both. I'd like to hear your opinions on it. Which one is more likely? And it looks like in lieu of Russian external political relationships slowly collapsing, they have announced joint military exercises with Armenia. Earlier last month, the Armenian president said that Russian peacekeepers in Nagorno-Karabakh are not doing their jobs. This is the territory where the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia has been going on for decades now, and Russia has been aiding the Armenian side in their defenses. So it looks like they're trying to show Armenia that they are willing to improve. These exercises are initiated by the so-called CSTO, or Collective Security Treaty Organization, which is basically Russia's attempt at recreating their own NATO. And this year, they're planning on conducting 8 bilateral military exercises with such countries: India, Laos, Pakistan, Algeria, Mongolia, Vietnam, and Shanghai. Well, it looks like Russians do have a lot to learn from these other militaries, because recently Ukraine delivered a very well-aimed blow at their base in Makiyivka and destroyed multiple units of their personnel. And Russian Defense Ministry is of course trying to shift the blame for poor operational support on the officials of the so-called DPR and recently mobilized forces, which, as we know, Russia controls and supplies, so at the end of the day, the circle comes back to the fold being Russia's. Another explosion was just recorded in Belgorod at what looks like a military base as well. Another one recently occurred in a military base in Jankoy in occupied Crimea. The invaders are having a really bad week, aren't they? So all they've got left to do to hold their positions is to grasp at straws, like they're doing at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. They're tightening the access control and introducing a pass-through system. Car owners are offered to issue passes for the checkpoints, and the system is promised to become mandatory. Passes will be issued at the so-called command post offices in the occupied territories of Ukraine, such as Melitopol, Berdyansk, Tokmak, and Vasilyevka. And the car owners are required to come in person. Now, why are they doing that? It is possible that they'll try to use the issuance of passes to force Ukrainians to join the war from the Russian side. How? Well, because now they have Russian documents, and now they're registered in the system, and now Russians can come for them. It's similar to what they were doing with forced citizenships. And this makes for an unfortunate but a perfect transition into our favorite segment, Russian madness. No wonder they're in a dire need of military personnel, because their own people are starting to suspect that Russian fallen soldiers are being used for organ trafficking. Here is a phone call in which 2 servicemen of the Russian forces are discussing it between themselves. I apologize for all the cursing in advance, there is a lot of it.
Помнишь, блядь, Рыжего, блядь, со 2-го взвода, блядь? Которого я вытягивал, блядь, под крайнего стрела, помнишь? Сука, он 300-м был, блядь. А вчера, блядь, рулик, блядь, лазил его, блядь, нашел, блядь, без почек.
Да ладно.
Да, помнишь метичку, блядь, ее чемоданы, вернее, блядь? Помнишь вот эти, блядь, большие, блядь?
Ага, белый такой с крестом, да?
Да, блядь. Сука, блядь. Я, блядь, подозреваю, что это, блядь, ну я тащил, я же помню, блядь, приебал, блядь, спина-то целая была, блядь. Куда почки делись, блядь? Кому война, сука, кому мать родна, блядь? Они ж на органы его, блядь, пустили, блядь.
Вот уроды.
Раз стрелять надо, блядь. Стрелять и валить домой, блядь. Простов, сука, блядь.
I mean, only in Russia, right? And while they're trying to convince the world that all Russian citizens are happy to go to war, a new wave of mobilization is looming. And it's evidenced by this. In Krasnodar, a printing house has just received an order for 5,000 subpoenas. I mean, I could say, we told you so. Our defense minister told you so in a literal New Year's address, and we warned you. But you didn't want to listen. The photos of the forms were published by the Russian people themselves. They indicate the year 2023 and the fact that a call is being carried out for mobilization to serve in the Russian army. Oh, and even with such lack of manpower, Russia is considering a new special military operation. Yeah, you heard that correctly. Against Japan. In connection with the administration of Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's policy of abandoning the country's peaceful development that has been declared for many decades and the transition to violent militarization, the adoption of an updated version of doctrinal documents in the field of defense and security with an eye to creating a strike potential, an unprecedented increase in spending on defense, we consider such activity by Tokyo as a serious challenge to the security of our own country and the Asia-Pacific region as a whole. We will be forced to take appropriate retaliatory measures in order to block military threats for Russia. In layman's terms, Russia is forbidding Japan to make their own autonomous decision on the state of their military or militarization as a whole, and in case of disobedience, they will just announce another special military operation. It seems a little counterproductive provided that they're failing at their original military operation, but who am I to say anything? Speaking of, here is an update on the latest situation in Bakhmut from a frontline soldier.
Ця ніч була досить важкою, як і попередня для наших підрозділів, оскільки початок місяця окупанти намагаються максимально штурмувати, поки в них є ще сили, поки в них ще поповнення не виснажене. Вони намагаються штурмувати наші позиції оборонні живою силою, знову ж таки, намагаються виснажувати наші війська. Хлопці стоять, хлопці тримаються, і нашим окопним левам велика шана, тому що вони витримують навалу, витримують штурми втричі, або декуди четверо більшої кількості особового складу. Тримають, але тримають дуже дорогою ціною. Ми повинні це з вами розуміти, тому що Бахмут стоїть, Бахмут тримається, але...
And right after that, the British intelligence stated that the Russian attack on Bakhmut failed completely, and they named 3 reasons why. 1. In mid-December, Russian military and Wagner proxy forces likely increased the frequency of their infantry assaults around the Donetsk Oblast town of Bakhmut. However, many of these operations were poorly supported. 2. Over the last 10 days, Ukraine has committed significant reinforcements to defend the sector, and the frequency of Russian assaults have likely reduced from the peak in mid-December. Both sides have suffered high casualties. 3. Russian offensive operations in the area are now likely being conducted at only platoon or section level. It is unlikely that Russia will achieve a significant breakthrough near Bakhmut in the coming weeks. Yikes! And then the head of the Wagner PMC Prigozhin admitted that they failed to capture Bakhmut himself. And he's preparing to place the blame on none else but Russian Ministry of Defense. According to the Institute for the Study of War, Yevgeny Prigozhin admitted that his forces have practically no advances in the area of Bakhmut. He told the Russian media that every house in the city is a fortress with a high concentration of the Ukrainian forces. And in order to absolve himself and his forces from the personal responsibility for a failed offensive, he's preparing an information campaign. This campaign is going to blame the Russian Ministry of Defense and the Russian military-industrial complex for failing to deliver him what he needed, specifically stressing the insufficient number of armored vehicles, ammunition, and stocks of 100mm shells. Placing the blame on someone else? Unheard of in Russia. Meanwhile, Ukraine reported that 3,400 Ukrainian civilians and military are still in Russian captivity, and it's incredibly hard to get them out of there. And then Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal announced a very dreary figure for our nation. The damage caused from the war of Russian aggression to our economy well exceeds $700 billion. Together with the World Bank, we're planning to conduct another verification of Ukraine's needs for the speedy recovery. Let me remind you that we have such a fixation at the beginning of June. Then the figure was 350 billion of damages. Given the recent attacks on our infrastructure, today this amount is more than 700 billion. And it is likely only going to increase if Russian attacks continue. And in order to force reparations out of Russia for these damages, the Ukrainian government confiscated $462 million worth of frozen assets from Russian banks on the territory of Ukraine. And despite all the hardships, Ukraine keeps coming up with solutions and is planning a major counteroffensive in the spring, according to Kirill Budanov. He stressed that the frontline fighting is going to be the hottest in about March. Then we will see more liberation of territories and the final defeat of the Russian Federation. This will happen throughout Ukraine from Crimea to Donbas. I promise, it won't take long now, and every taxpayer in the United States will be able to see where every cent has gone. Together, we will change this world. And this success is despite no intelligence agency in the world giving us a chance when Russia attacked on February 24th. Piggybacking off of Budanov's speech, Alexei Danilov said that representatives of various special structures came to Kyiv and predicted the occupation of Ukraine. They thought that top political and military leadership will be eliminated right away, and concentration and filtration camps will be created on the territory of our country in no time. This is what they told us. I answered them that you just do not know us. This will not happen. I want you to understand. No intelligence service of the world, no country gave us a chance at all. They all believed that we would not have such abilities, and they were very annoyed when we said that it will not happen, because you do not know us. They constantly believed that we are the same as Russians, and it was a deep mistake of everyone without exception, both our partners and our non-partners, who today are becoming partners. Woo! That was chilling. And this isn't even all. We continue creating innovative solutions to our problems. The government of Ukraine is planning a number of measures to launch mini power plant systems. Yeah, mini power plant systems. Those are small and do not require special care. 20 such stations can produce the power of one nuclear unit. They will help supply settlements with water and heat, as well as help ensure the safety of the nuclear generation. As if that wasn't impressive enough, Ukraine also created an inexpensive alternative of a virtual control system in battle. The Wall Street Journal writes, Ukraine has created a low-cost version of what the Pentagon has spent decades and billions of dollars on: fighter jets, intelligence, and weapons networked digitally. They further note that Kyiv's impromptu network of drones, fighter jets, and weapons linked via satellite communication and special software gives the military an advantage in terms of intelligence. Also, in terms of coordination and accuracy compared to the clumsy Russian army. And the most impressive element of Ukraine's innovation success is how various military units and Ukrainian tech companies are working together to create new technology and solve these issues. Let's move on to international affairs. Speaking of publications writing about Ukraine, the New York Times got accused of manipulating information because of the recent article that they dropped. Here it is. Ukraine defends against Russia's inexpensive drones with far costlier missiles. One Shahed UAV can cost up to $20,000, and the cost of launching a missile from $140,000. The press secretary of the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Yuri Ignat, has called them out with a very strong worded response. He explained why it is incorrect to compare the cost of the UAV to the cost of the air defense missiles, like the New York Times did. A Shahed drone carries up to 40 kilograms of explosives. When it hits the target, a fire breaks out, and people die. He urged to instead calculate how much monetary damage can a drone strike cause versus the cost of an air defense missile. He noted that if there is a threat to human life, the armed forces of Ukraine will take every measure available to prevent it. And he then concluded that although missiles are expensive, life is more valuable, and the armed forces of Ukraine are going to continue using them. Now, on a separate note, this is not the first time that the New York Times has used Kremlin-like rhetoric to describe something that happened in Ukraine. So I'll just leave it at that. Despite these loud accusations, the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, for one, has pledged his support for Ukraine as saying that the Netherlands will do everything to help Ukraine win. According to him, the next couple of months are going to be decisive, and he is determined to not only help us resist, but to win on the battlefield as well. And interestingly, right after that, Germany has made a very, very bold and crucial move. The head of the Munich Security Conference said that Germany has a moral obligation to support Ukraine and that they finally need to supply us with Leopard tanks. We Germans committed terrible crimes in Ukraine during World War II, and we have a moral duty to support this country. We must finally supply the Leopard tanks. We will be able to live in peace with Russia only in the post-Putin era. And immediately after, Germany announced that they are ready to seize Russian assets to help rebuild Ukraine. Now that is a strong move of support, if you ask me. Then Estonia followed up, announcing their intentions to be the first country in Europe to transfer the frozen assets of the Russian Federation to Ukraine. We discussed this in the government and decided that in parallel we will start creating a legal structure that will allow the use of this money. And that comes in the foreground of the United States and other Western countries having been pressuring Switzerland to release Russian assets to rebuild Ukraine, as it holds one of the largest lump sums. They have blocked 7.5 billion francs worth of Russian assets and 15 properties. Normally, Switzerland stays neutral in issues like this, but this time around they said that they will consider taking a side because it's a huge international conflict and it matters. So let's hope they make the right decision. And in the meanwhile, the largest potential source of funding could be the reserves of Russia's central bank, worth $300 billion. They have been arrested in the EU and G7 countries, and in addition to that, $19 billion have been arrested from Russian oligarchs as well. And you would think that's a lot, but it's just a drop in the sea as opposed to $750 billion worth of damage that Russia has inflicted on Ukraine just so far. And let's hope that this piece of information will make this decision easier for particularly Switzerland. The Hague City Council supported the initiative to establish a special tribunal for the Russian Federation in the city. Now we just gotta get them to pay for their crimes. And on the topic of crimes, looks like Russia's criminal behavior at the UN is about to be over. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said that a number of countries were surprised to learn about Russia's illegal stay on the UN Security Council. According to him, several countries have already supported Ukraine on this matter, and others are still carefully studying the situation and looking into the archives. If you want to know more about Ukraine's reasoning to expel Russia from the UN, watch my previous brief. I'll link it right here. Kuleba summed it all up by saying that Ukraine has begun the process of delegitimization of Russia's membership on the Security Council, and added that Ukraine is preparing for the next steps in this direction. Namely, the state is not only working on official statements, but also on a broad public advocacy campaign. And I really hope it works, because once you review the evidence, you will find out that Russia never belonged on the UN Security Council to begin with. And with that, that's all I have for you for today. If you enjoyed watching this brief, please don't forget to give it a like, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel, and turn on all of your notifications so you don't miss when the next one comes out. And as always, check your sources and don't fall for propaganda. And I will see you on Sunday. Oh wow, I got that.